Welcome to a new episode of Superpowered Fancast. This is Darren. On this episode of the Fancast, I have the pleasure of talking to writer David Pepose. Now, David Pepose is the creator of the comic book series Spencer and Locke, as well as writer of series like Punisher, Moon Knight, City of the Dead, Savage Avengers, Avengers Unlimited, Scout's Honor, The OZ, Going to the Chapel, and The Devil That Wears My Face. His latest series is Space Ghost from Dynamite Entertainment. The first issue is currently available, and you can read my review of it on superpoweredfancast.com. We talk about his comic book journey, his career and process, as well as his work. So without further ado, here's my interview with David Pepose. David Pepose, thank you so much for being on the podcast this month. I really appreciate it. I'm going to apologize in advance for fanboying on a bunch of stuff.
All right.
It's like I've been reading a lot of your work. I started reading some of your stuff, especially Spencer and Locke, and then I really got into Savage Avengers when you were writing it. So, but I want to talk about I want to talk about a lot of things, but I don't again
Sure.
want to take up a whole lot of your time. But
No,
okay,
please. I love talking about this stuff. I appreciate you reading all of it. It's nice to know when you're writing all this stuff, you never know if it's going to resonate with anybody, and it's sort of a solitary creation process. So just hearing that you're reading it, it means a lot to me.
well, I appreciate that. Well, the first thing I want to talk about, and I'm sure you talked about it before, but and you don't
Sure.
have to go into like a long explanation, but just kind of want to get into your comic book journey. Like, I don't want you to, you
Sure.
don't have, yeah, you don't have to like tell me like the first comic book you ever read, but just kind of what kind of got you into the medium.
Well, I'll have you know it was Amazing Spider-Man 346. Uh, no, I'm a third generation comics fan. My grandfather read Calvin and Hobbes to me when I was a newborn, and my mother grew up reading comics, and so I come by it all very honestly. My parents got me a handful of Marvel books in like '92, I think.
Mm.
Uh, an issue of Spider-Man, an issue of Cap, an issue of Hulk, and an issue of Silver Surfer that Silver Surfer wasn't even in. And it hooked me for life. And
Yeah.
so I got my start in the business. I got my start as an intern at DC. I
Okay.
worked on books like Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis and Green Lantern Secret Origin. Even a little tiny bit of Blackest Night. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me. It really kind of taught me that, like, oh, people, like, there are people who make a living doing this kind of work, and it got me to know all the different facets that go into creating a comic. And unfortunately, that was the summer of 2008. There was a certain global recession that hit around that time, and so I wound up falling back on something else I had studied in college, which was journalism. And I wound up working as a crime and politics reporter for the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts,
Mhm.
way west Massachusetts. And I was moonlighting at Newsarama. I wrote reviews for them for a long time. I did creator interviews. I wound up taking over the review section for several years. And as I'm sure you know, that like when you're reading so many comics, it's like being a kid in a candy store, but
Yeah.
you are expected to eat more than your fill of candy. And statistically speaking, you're not going to like 50% of the candy. That's just like how it goes.
Right.
And so for me, it kind of came in waves. Sometimes I'd have a period where I'm loving everything that's coming out. And then there'd be periods where like the wave crashes and there's like a handful of
Mhm.
titles that were kind of keeping me going. And so when I hit kind of one of those crashes, I had this moment where I felt like I needed to change my relationship with comics, or I needed to just kind of hang up my spurs and just be a civilian again.
Mhm.
And at the time, I thought my path was I was going to be an editor. And so as a result, I made my own comic, thinking that like maybe this could show people that I could be an editor. Talk about like putting the cart before the horse.
Right.
Uh, and that book was Spencer and Locke. That was my first series at Action Lab. And meanwhile, I had moved out from New York. I was working publicity at CBS to Los Angeles. I thought maybe I could learn the ropes in like a development office, here in LA. And that was like the hardest job of my entire life. I was very, very bad at it. And meanwhile, we're getting like really positive reviews for Spencer and Locke. And growing up in the Midwest, I never thought that like being a writer would be an option for me.
Yeah.
But seeing those reviews, like finally the light bulb went off where I was just like, oh, I could just do this. I could just do this. And I've been really fortunate that I've been able to do that ever since. And just working with some of the best collaborators in the business, and working with just some really amazing editors. And I've just been getting up every day. It's knowing that this is the hardest job of my entire life, but it's the one that I it's the most satisfying. This is my astronaut job, and I get up every day just feeling so lucky and grateful that I get to be able to do this.
I got to. So on that same note,
Yeah.
is it one of those situations where you create the comic and then uh companies start seeking you out, or is it that you create the comic and then you get the confidence to kind of pitch things?
Yeah, it's usually more of the latter. Although as I've had more time in the industry, it has shifted a little more towards the former. When I came out with Spencer and Locke, I wrote the first issue. I had teamed up with George Santiago Jr. and Jason Smith and Colin Bell, and it took us a long time to get even just our pitch pages together.
Yeah,
Because for both me and George, this was our first direct market debut. Even Jason, who sadly passed last year, he it only had like kind of a small sprinkling of direct market releases. Colin Bell, our letterer, was like the most experienced person on the whole team.
yeah,
And so it took us a little while to put that together, and we shopped that book all over town. And there were a lot of people who either didn't get the vision, or they saw me as a reviewer and they figured if he could do the job, he would have done the job already. Not realizing that no, this was just like Midwestern creative, like imposter syndrome,
yeah.
that stopped me. Um, so I give Dave Dwanch, who used to be an editor at Action Lab, I give him all the credit. He was the one who pulled our book out of the slush pile and said, "How soon do you think you could get this thing done?" And I felt like this chill go down my spine when I got that email, where I realized in that moment that I had dipped my toe in the deep end of the pool enough times that I accidentally fell in. And I was like, "Oh, I have to finish this book now." And all the everything I learned being a comics journalist, all the theory that I picked up, every bit of the creative toolbox that I had learned from other creators was like just barely enough to get me across the finish line. You can only kind of have so much theory before you have to put rubber to road. And then you figure out what then you figure out what's really important to you, and what might you leave in the rear view. So yeah, so my first several books were a lot like that. Spencer and Locke, I had to pitch that all over town. Going to the chapel, I pitched that all over town. And Action Lab at the time, was financially solvent, and so they picked up that book and a Spencer and Locke sequel. Um, Scouts Honor, and Aftershock, I was beating down their doors for at least 2 years. Before I could finally kind of get something over the plate over there. And even then, I pitched them other books that I felt really confident about after Scouts Honor that they didn't take. So, it really is, it can go either way. It wasn't until after Scouts Honor that kind of changed my career in a big
Mhm.
way. In that I worked with Mike Martz, who was one of my intern bosses at DC back in the day. I worked with him and Christina Harrington, who's one of the best editors I've ever worked with, on Scouts Honor. They were former Marvel editors. And so that finally got CB Cebulski and Tom Brevoort to give me a shot. I'd been emailing them for years, just being like, hey, I got a new book coming out. I'm not going anywhere. If you want to hire me so I can stop annoying you, be my guest. And Tom and CB read Scout's Honor, and they thought, okay, maybe he's ready for prime time. And so they reached out to me with my first Marvel assignment, which was Savage Avengers.
Yeah.
And I still remember exactly where I was. I just moved into my current place, me and my now fiance. We had just moved in like a month prior, maybe two at most. And we had a brand new puppy. She was like 6 months old. And
Mhm.
I remember getting the email from Tom that said possible Marvel assignment or possible Marvel project. And he wouldn't tell me what it was. I had to fill out like some paperwork. When you're working for like a licensed place like that,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
basically have you fill out paperwork that says, "Hey, if you pitch us something that like we already coincidentally have in the works, like you can't sue us over that."
Right.
And so I sent, I write the thing and I'm like, oh, I wonder what this could be. Is it an anthology story or maybe like
Mhm.
a one shot or like, oh my gosh, could it be a mini series? And then I get the email that says, we're going to be relaunching Savage Avengers and we wanted to see if you had any ideas. And I swear I felt my soul leave my body. And our new puppy, Ruby, clearly something shifted in the air because I hadn't said anything out loud, but suddenly she pounced on me. Like the mood in
Yeah,
the room
she
changed.
could feel them.
You could
Yeah.
feel something shift. And so yeah, and I've been really fortunate to be working with Tom pretty consistently ever since. Um but yeah, like since Scout's Honor, like now I've been lucky enough that like I've built enough of a body of work that I have had publishers reach out to me, whether it's Mad Cave reaching out to me, which turned into a conversation that became The Devil That Wears My Face, which
Mhm.
our finale comes out just this week. Or Marvel hitting me up for more work, things like Moon Knight City of the Dead and Punisher.
Mhm.
And also Dynamite, who reached out to me at New York Comic Con last year. It just announced a new licensing deal with Warner Brothers Discovery with new comics like Thundercats and Johnny Quest and
Mhm.
Powerpuff Girls. And Joe Rybandt approached me at the show and said, we really liked what you did on Moon Knight City of the Dead and Punisher. We've got Space Ghost and you'd be our top choice. Do you have any ideas?
Mhm.
And that's so now it's kind of a little mix of like sometimes they approach me, sometimes I approach them. And I think that's nice. It's a nice like kind of push and pull
Yeah.
where especially if there's something original that I can throw into the ring. Of course I'm very excited about it. But there is a nice kind of reactivity when somebody approaches you with a property or that I mean, anybody who says that, like, oh, I would have known what to have written for Space Ghost before they approached me. I mean,
Mhm.
they've got a shinier crystal ball than I do.
Right.
Uh, for me, but that's kind of fun. It's like, I did a Fantastic Four two-parter last year. I did a Hulk annual. Before I got those emails, I had nothing. I would not have
Right.
had anything in my back pocket. Uh, they sort of throw you out of the plane, and you got to figure out, to build that parachute in your way down. But
But at
that's
the
a
very
lot of
least, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but at the
no, no,
very least,
no.
it shows that, when they're hey, we want to do this, let's call David, or let's send him
Yeah.
an email and see if he has an idea. So at least you're on their mind.
Yes. And it's it's
Yes.
it's one of those things. I'm too dumb to say no about many things. And so sometimes it's a lot of free reign, like Space Ghost. Other times, it's something that we got to really thread the needle, like my Punisher run.
Right.
And it's one of those things that I just watched The Fall Guy this weekend, and I
Mhm.
felt a strange kinship with them where I'm just like, yeah, strap me in. We want to do a cannon roll? Like, yeah, let's do it. And I feel like I sometimes feel like a stunt jumper for comics, but yeah, man, any landing you can walk away from is a good one.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of enjoy rolling with it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've been really fortunate in a lot of the projects that I've been offered, and I always try to find something that's fun about them, and yeah, it makes it a real dream job.
Right. I mean, and you were talking about, talking about Dynamite and about Warner Brothers and Space Ghost. So, when they, when they ask you that question, like, do you have a personal connection with Space Ghost, with
Yeah.
the character? Like,
So
I know I did growing up, like him and Johnny Quest and all those cartoons growing up. So, what was your
my
kind
intro to
of like
Space Ghost.
first thoughts when they said Space Ghost?
So, it's funny. For me, I've always I've tried to really kind of drink in as much knowledge about the industry as
Mhm.
possible and the history behind it. And it's always funny how that always seems to pay off like years down the road when I'm not expecting it. And that is exactly what happened to me on Space Ghost.
Right.
I grew up, I really kind of came of age in the 90s. So like I missed the original Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I missed the 80s revival. Even like Boomerang, like I wasn't in a place to be watching a lot of it. My introduction to Space Ghost, like many of my generation, was Coast to Coast.
Right.
And so for a long time I just thought, oh, this is like a like a parody superhero kind of thing.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was at DC that I started to kind of learn more about creators, like really broadening my mental Rolodex, so to speak.
Hmm.
And Alex Toth being one of those names. And if you don't know who Alex Toth is, for anybody listening, I saw somebody refer to him as the Jack Kirby of Hanna-Barbera, and I thought that was such a great way to describe him. And so, he designed so much for Hanna-Barbera, Space Ghost being kind of one of the crown jewels.
Right.
And so, learning about him, I was like, oh, Space Ghost was like an actual like superhero back in the day.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if they had done a reprint or somehow I got my hands on the Joe Kelly and Ariel Olivetti Space Ghost miniseries. I got a trade of that while I was interning at DC.
Hmm.
And so reading that, I was kind of like, huh, there's like, this is a superhero. I didn't know that. And so I kind of filed that away. Just being like, oh yeah, that's a character that's like got some cool stuff to him, that he's got that amazing Alex Toth design, but also like he's got the powers, it's people call him Space Batman a lot of times, but it's also there's a degree of Superman to him too, and just the fact that he's got the super strength and he's got the flight and he's got this array of like elemental powers, with
Hmm.
the power bands that give him the power of fire and ice and laser beams and force fields, and he's got his Invisibelt that lets him turn invisible. So it is kind of like almost like a Batman Superman fighting
Yeah.
crime in the Star Wars universe. And and so, of course, like I think, oh, that's interesting. And then, I file that away in the back of my head and go on with my life for like a decade and a half. And so fast forward to 2023. And Dynamite says, hey, Space Ghost, would you be interested? And I just wrapped up my Punisher miniseries. And so I had a break in my schedule. And I was thinking, like, okay, let's think about this character a little bit. And as I was doing, the research, I was like, yeah, wait, he's got all these amazing villains. The villains was the thing that really kind of stood out to me. Was I was like, wait, he's got like a deep bench of rogues. Like he's got Zorak and Brack and Metalis and the Widow and Creature King and Moltar. I mean, he's got enough A-list villains that they then came together as a supergroup, the
Hmm.
Council of Doom. And that fact that that's just the tip of the iceberg, that there's like so many more. And
Yeah.
that speaks to the kind of creative genius that Alex Toth was, is that like those original episodes of Space Ghost, as I rewatched every single episode researching this series, they're only 5 minutes pop. There's no room for any character development. There's no continuity. Really, the only continuity, so to speak, is when the Council of Doom all shows up in the last few episodes of the original run.
Right.
Uh, and I was just like, it struck me that I was like, wait, this is a character that's got all the ingredients of an A-lister, and nobody's done like a definitive comic run of it.
Right.
And I think it speaks to, like I said, Alex Tuff, he lends so much character through the design, where you see somebody like Zorak and you're like, oh, that's a homicidal praying mantis. Like, I get a vibe of who he is.
Hmm.
Brack, meanwhile, he's kind of blue collar in his aspirations. He's just looking to knock over a gold freighter.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was just like, wait a minute, like this is perfect. This is like a new ultimate universe almost, that nobody's done anything with. And the fact that Dynamite was so generous with the runway. I mean, a lot of my licensed work, we have a pretty finite runway with it. Savage
Right.
Avengers being like the longest thing I've worked on, and I was offered a 10-issue commitment when I took on that series, and even like Moon Knight City of the Dead, I was told this is five issues. Punisher, I was told this is 4 issues.
Right.
Um, Space Ghost, they said has a year to start.
Yeah.
And so like when I wound up delivering my final pitch, I had pitched 12 issues in an annual. And as far as I know, that's the runway that we're adhering to start. And if we've got other stories in my back pocket that I can kind of slot in there, if if
Hmm.
if demand is there. Um, so yeah, it was one of those. The more I learned about Space Ghost, the more I really kind of dug into the original series and the 80s revival. Uh, the word potential
Yeah.
kept coming to mind, where I was just like, there's so much cool stuff that nobody's explored in any medium. He's this cult character that's just, you know, I felt like I was being presented with a table filled with like the most amazing ingredients and then said, nobody's made a meal out of this. And so that was really exciting to me. And also just the opportunity to really kind of take my own spin on the superhero genre with no restrictions. because it's the best part of working in a shared universe, but it's also a double-edged sword, is that they're shared. You share the toys. You got to make sure that you're kind of playing nice with everybody else, that you're working within sort of what the greater traffic patterns are doing. Um, the most challenging part about working at a place like Marvel or DC is half the time you're like, I know the perfect villain for this story. And then your editors, knowing where all the bodies are buried, say, well, actually, MODOK is being used in X-Men right
Yeah.
now. And obviously, I wouldn't know that because that's not coming out for 6 months. But then you have to kind of be creative and you have to pivot and you have to figure
Right.
out like, okay, is there another villain that fills this role, or can I fit in another villain and sort of pivot where the story's going? I know we had a lot of back and forth on that with my Fantastic Four two-parter, and
Mhm.
also my Punisher mini. I was just figuring out what villains are available and fit the space. I don't have to do that for Space Ghost. Space Ghost, I literally just say I want that toy, and here's how I'm planning to play with it. And so far, Warner Brothers has been an incredible partner with
Yeah.
all this. I mean, that's been amazing. The most amazing part is that I pitched them a lot of stuff where I was like, boy, I wonder if they're going to go for this. I hope they don't think it's like too far afield. And I see the notes on the script that's like, yeah, that rules. Yeah, that's great. Run with that. And I've never had an experience like that with the licensor, and I totally understand why. I mean, most licensors, they feel a strong responsibility to the license. They want to make sure that it's not going too far afield, that it's not misrepresenting anything that the company would want, that it's not stepping on any bigger toes. I wrote a Darth Vader short. I've written Conan the Barbarian. Like they've got bigger global priorities.
Right.
Warner Brothers knows there's no continuity. They know there's no backstory.
Yeah.
They've been really game for saying like, okay, how would you make this universe like a cohesive, organic thing?
Right.
Uh, like, what do you think's the most character-driven and dynamic way of going about doing that? And it's a real gift. It's a real rare opportunity to be able to play with something like this at this scale. And yeah, it's been some of the most fun work I've ever worked on.
Right. But in to what you were saying, especially going back to the history of the character,
Yeah,
because I the original Alex Toth animated shorts were before my time, so I grew up with the '80s revival, uh,
yeah,
just coming up in the like late '70s, early '80s. So I had the kind of revival stuff. So I had like little shorts there, and I enjoyed the character. And then I really enjoyed the comedic take on it with Coast to Coast.
yeah.
So my question along those lines is that for people, do were any of those things in your mind when you were as you're thinking along about the story you want to tell?
Sure.
It's like, are people going to be are the people thinking about the coast to coast version, are the people thinking of the '80s version, people thinking the original '60s version? And how does that I mean, do you let it um not influence, but do you let it kind of is it something that you think about, or are you just like, what, this is a story I want to tell, and
Yeah,
people can take it or leave it?
it's a
And how do
great
you kind of,
question.
yeah, and how do you kind of straddle that line though?
So the way that I wound up approaching this, because you asked, it's a great question.
Yeah.
And for me, I think Space Ghost, he's always been a product of his time, every time that he's appeared. So you have the original 66 cartoon, which was heavily influenced by Adam West's Batman.
Yeah.
Everybody was trying to get a piece of that pie in 1966. And if you didn't have a superhero to license, you made up one of your own,
Right.
like Space Ghost. So you see a lot of that shared DNA, like a lot of the Silver Age camp and
Mhm.
wild energy thrown into it. And then the 81 revival, where you're coming right on the heels of Super Friends, and
Right.
you're right up there as a contemporary with Spider-Man and his amazing friends. And so you kind of see like, oh, like you see they're kind of trying to lean into that a bit more. And then you have Coast to Coast, which I think really distilled like the irony of like the MTV generation.
Right.
Like, that's something that like that feels like a contemporary alongside Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill and and things like that. And then you have Joe Kelly's run in
Yeah.
2005, which was an origin story that while it came out shortly before Batman Begins, you wouldn't know it having read it. Like
Right.
it's very much of that zeitgeist. And so for me, when I approach this series, not only did I remember things like Future Quest, where people were like, oh yeah, like let's see the
Yeah.
Hanna-Barbera characters
Yeah,
done
I
more.
actually had that collected series with like the
Yeah,
Herculoids and Johnny Quest and all that. So yeah.
exactly. And seeing, I remember what the response was to I've seen people talk about that Joe Kelly run on Space Ghost. So I was kind of like, okay, I think people can handle like a traditional superhero take.
Right,
So, but my thinking was, it's the year 2024. Space Ghost has not had a comics appearance in almost 20 years. Really, the only time that there's been new Space Ghost content since Coast to Coast was like a 5 minute intro in Batman the Brave and the Bold.
right.
And so I was like, okay, if he's reinventing himself every generation, if Space Ghost becomes sort of the lens of the times, how do we tell a Space Ghost story in the year 2024 that
Yeah,
like feels modern, that feels like we're kind of taking the storytelling techniques of today,
yeah,
but also still reintroducing the character for a brand new generation? Because yeah, there's a lot of people, it's funny. It's like for me, I think of the 2005 miniseries is like, oh, it feels like yesterday. Nope, that was 20 years ago. That is a
yeah,
generation. There's a whole crop of readers who, if they've heard of that book, if they've read that book, they're getting it through the dollar bins. They're getting it through, you know. And so for me, I saw this as like a brand new, fresh start,
right,
where it's just like, you don't know who Space Ghost is, you're the target audience.
right.
It took me 2 months of promoting this book, and literally the day that it released, a buddy of mine was like, "Oh, it's Ultimate Space Ghost," and I was like, "I can't believe you sold this book better than me, like in 1 second." But that's sort of the way that I've been kind of treating it ever since, is that like it's brand new jumping on points, all new continuity. We're not beholden to any of the cartoons. We're not beholden to any of the previous comics appearances. Um, I wanted to make it that this is a clean jumping on point. I want to introduce all these classic characters, but like kind of give them a fresh coat of paint and like just say like, okay, like they've endured because of Alex Toth's amazing designs. But what about these characters stands out to me? And like, how can we add in these like interesting little wrinkles and interesting little spins to them, to kind of make this universe feel organic and cohesive, but to still ultimately tell kind of this emotional story. Because I think that's the real draw of a character like Space Ghost to me, and where I think he deviates from somebody like Batman. Batman's a character that he's built to last 60 years continuously.
Right.
And so that characters like that, it leans into, what people call the illusion of change. That like even if you have like a big shift in a character, Electric Blue Superman, or
Mhm.
Ben Riley as Spider-Man or Krakoa,
Yeah,
inertia kicks in. Like things do kind of go back to status quo. Space Ghost, by virtue of not having to carry a title for 700 issues continuously, you can have him change. You can have him
right,
grow. And so, even you look at his sidekicks, it's not generational like the Robins. If Jan and Jace go to college, there's no new Jan and Jace.
right.
And so I think that has been like, I think the real fun of this series for me is being able to tell a story where we do have like a concrete emotional arc, where it is Space Ghost kind of crossing paths with his sidekicks for the first time,
Yeah.
and watching how they each kind of grow and play off each other and evolve over the course of our year-long storyline.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I actually really enjoyed about the first issue is introducing those characters, but in a way that it made sense that there would be two orphans, you know,
Yeah,
living with Space Ghost. It made sense that they would have a monkey. There's a reason for the monkey,
yeah,
and that it gives not only Jan and Jason emotional arc, with what happens to them to get them, in Space Ghost orbit, but it gives him something
yeah,
to work off of, and we can kind of see, and I'm seeing like we're seeing him through them,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the other thing I
exactly.
really enjoy because I like the mysterious element of it, and I really like the fact that it wasn't like the thing I always fear, especially when it's something from like my childhood. Uh,
Sure.
that the thing I always fear when something is announced from my childhood is that okay, we're getting the Dark Knight Returns version.
Right.
of this character.
Right.
He's gonna it's like well he's gonna he's Space Ghost, so now he's got to be like all black and
Right. Right.
and that was my fear. And then I saw the first images. I was like, okay, and that's actually this one of the things that kind of said, okay, I'm gonna give this one a try. But yeah, it was definitely one of those fears. So I was wondering, like, was that something that I'm not going to ask you if you were, if you were thinking of going down that
Yeah.
road,
No, it
but it is
well, it was
something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed what you did with it by not
thank you.
by kind of
You know,
making it your own.
my thinking, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to make sure that we kind of towed the line that like I'm not looking to make like grim and gritty Space Ghost. And I can totally understand why people might be afraid of that because I literally just came off of the Punisher miniseries. My first book was grim and gritty, Calvin and Hobbes. Like I won an award for grim and gritty, the Wizard of Oz. I get it. But that's not what this book is.
Yeah,
And I understand especially how easy it would be for people to make that leap because after Coast to Coast, anything is a traditional superhero.
right.
If you're not, it's easy to make that leap to say it's going to be the grim and gritty version. For me, it's more, I'm trying to write this. I don't think anything we're writing is any grimmer or grittier than like an average issue of Batman.
Yeah.
I had said kind of tonally, my goal was to kind of hit between Batman the Animated Series and Batman the Long Halloween.
Mhm.
Because look, you can't avoid that there's a Batman, like there's Batman DNA in Space Ghost. It's
Right.
literally why the character was created. But for me, yeah, the thing that as I was doing research on the character, there were two things that I had to wrap my head around at first. Which was first, how do his powers work? Because if you watch those original cartoons, he has a lot of powers, and sometimes he will throw in an extra power that's never been established and never will be seen again. And so I had to kind of wrap my head around like how do the power bands work, and can I give him limitations, and like how does any of this work, just to figure out how to choreograph him, and how to give him genuine threats to all of us. But the other thing was, okay, sidekicks. What's the deal with these sidekicks? And that wound up becoming kind of the heart and soul of the book, and is kind of the emotional through line that connects our entire run. And for me, I reread Joe Kelly and Ariel Olivetti's run, and like I said, it's kind of a Batman Begins sort of take, where you see, Space Ghost as as a space cop, essentially, like a civilian, and
Right.
then he gets betrayed by his unit, and he's left for dead, and then he comes back as this vigilante. And Jan and Jace show up very briefly. They aren't really. They kind of pop in, and then Space Ghost leaves them, and then he comes back for them at like the end of the series.
Right.
Um, so I was kind of like, huh, I don't want to retread what Joe Kelly did. Like, I think trying to do like a standalone origin for Space Ghost, like it's been done, and it's been done 20 years ago.
Right.
There's no sense trying to like reinvent that wheel. And also for me, I feel like Space Ghost's origin, and you'll see it by the time issue 2 comes out. It's pretty straightforward, sole survivor of his planet that was attacked by space pirates, and so he is going off to stop pirates from doing the same to other planets. It's
Right.
pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll get a sense of Space Ghost origins in like the span of 3 pages in issue 2. I'm not going to belabor that point,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I thought, huh, Jan and Jace, like I had to ask myself, like, do I want to tell a story with these characters? And immediately I was kind of like, I think that's what sets Space Ghost apart.
Right.
You watch those original cartoons. It's not it's not like Batman and Robin, where there's sometimes adventures where Batman shows up and there's no Robin and it feels totally organic. Space Ghost, it is an ensemble story. It's an ensemble show from the very first episode. I thought it was such a smart play. I assume they meant it this way, is that it's like, okay, we want boys and girls to watch this show. So we're
Mhm.
going to give you a point of view character. If you're a boy, you can glom onto Jace, and if you're a girl, hey, you're watching Jan, which in 1966 that was pretty feminist. Even if it's like a little dated when you see it now.
Mhm.
Um, and then of course, like, let's give him a pet monkey because you know what? In the Silver Age, DC noticed that if they put a monkey on the cover, there would be a noticeable uptick in sales. It was I don't know if they had like focus group testing back then, but if they did, I mean, it feels just, it feels like laser guided towards kids.
Right.
And I thought, it's not like Batman and Robin, where, like I said, it can feel a little like an accessory and there's that generational aspect.
Mhm.
Um, one sidekick is just happenstance. Two is a coincidence. Three is a pattern. It
Right.
felt very deliberate, particularly to have a monkey in there,
Yeah.
and as I was thinking about it, it's like that would be like trying to make like a banana split with no banana.
Right.
It doesn't feel. That's what makes Space Ghost different. It's not just the powers. It's the group. And so that became kind of like the through line of the whole story for me was I was like, okay, let's introduce Jan and Jace. Let's make them like Babs Gordon and Dick Grayson meets like Lex and Tim from Jurassic Park.
Right.
And so that makes Space Ghost kind of our Dr. Grant in a way, where he's great at his job. In this case, not as an archaeologist, but as a guy who fights space pirates. But like dealing with kids,
Yeah.
he's a work in progress, to say the least.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that speaks to Space Ghost's deal, which is, sole survivor of his planet. Now it's called the Ghost Planet. It's like a spaceship graveyard. He sort of turned that into his base.
Mhm.
And he's kind of had, just by virtue of his name and wearing this mask, he's had to kind of push his humanity way down.
Right.
The mission's the only thing that matters to him right now until he meets these kids. And it's like that's what happens when you have an audience, is that suddenly like you become a little more aware of yourself. And suddenly that humanity that he's pushed down, he can't just play it being a monster anymore.
Right.
He has to really kind of reckon with that. And it's uncomfortable for him. It can make him irritable at times. And like anybody who has to be confront when they have a problem,
Yeah.
because you not only have to confront you have a problem, you have to confront what you lost, what that problem took from you, and you have to then face like, oh, I have to make a change in my life. Like, oh, this sucks. Um, it's Space Ghost as the ultimate single dad.
Right.
And him playing him as sort of this straight man against Jan and Jace, I wanted to make it a point that like these are teenagers and like young teenagers.
Yeah.
Like Jan, she's the feisty one. She's the one who, like many only girls in the family, she's been forced to be the responsible one. She has to think things through.
Mhm.
And that kind of can rub her the wrong way, because her brother is, very impulsive, and Space Ghost can have a lot of tunnel vision.
Right.
So she'll tell off Space Ghost to his face.
Yeah.
And Space Ghost will be like, I would rather fight an asteroid field than deal with this 13-year-old anime. Uh, she's like a crack shot with a blaster. So like I wanted to make sure that like we kept up with sort of the what I saw as the feminist intentions behind Jan
Right.
when she was first introduced, and really kind of, lean into that. And then Jace, he's the impulsive one. He leaps before he looks, and he's like a natural gearhead.
Mhm.
He's a builder, he's a pilot. Um, he's also the comic relief. I say he's closer in emotional intelligence to Blip than he is to Jan.
Yeah.
But he's the one who feels like, well, I have to make jokes. I have to make people laugh, because if I don't, what little family I have left is going to go their separate ways.
Right.
And so having Jan and Jace as this yin and yang playing off of each other, and then having Space Ghost sort of bouncing off of them and every so often getting like a devastating zinger in. Um, that's like a really fun dynamic. And then you throw in Blip, who, he's a character, he doesn't speak. He's just got monkey squeaks. So for him, it's like a little goes a long way. You don't want him obviously like stealing the show, but you want to justify his presence in the book and also like have him sort of show up as a wild card when you need him. But also, he's funny, because Jonathan Lau, our artist, does such a great job with the physical comedy for Blip, particularly, where like just the expressions, he just turned in a page last night that I shared on Twitter, where it's just like Blip, like this look at his face. Jan is telling Jace to that like he has the emotional intelligence of Blip, and Blip just looks at her like, me, like
Right.
and it's a cast that I've really fallen in love with, and I think that's really the ultimate thing for me, is that like, yeah, we've got all the sci-fi spectacle of it all, but this is ultimately like a found family story, and I want you to kind of invest in Jan and Jace and Blip and Space Ghost. And I want you to see them kind of like take steps forward, and that sometimes they'll get, knocked on their ass, and they'll have to kind of they'll have to help each other out.
Right.
And sort of, it's a really it's a fun story where we can really dive into the characters and
Yeah.
not have to focus on like what's the new concept that's going to reinvent the wheel, when I don't think it needs reinventing. I think these characters, um, I liken it to archaeology. Coast to Coast kind of took those bones of Space Ghost and preserved
Mhm.
them in amber for 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 decades.
Right.
And I get to be the archaeologist that gets to like excavate that and be like, those bones are just as strong as they were in 1966.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I hope that you kind of get a taste for it in issue one. I think by the time you read issue two, hopefully you'll fall in love with those characters just as much as I have.
Well, that's again one of the things I enjoyed about the first issue, especially, is that you set yourself up for some interesting storytelling. Like you have like everything in that first issue has the potential to kind of to expand the world in different ways. Like, I like the fact that Brack is in the first issue,
Yeah,
and that you just kind of see like you kind of gave him a reason to kind of go after both Space Ghost and the kids, like beyond just just the reason behind it. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but
yeah,
but yeah, you have like you've created a pardon the term, a space where you kind of can run with a lot of different things and a lot of different themes as far as both, with the characters and the character dynamics together and the adventure and there's the mysteries and the conspiracies and things like that. So I really enjoyed the first issue and I'm looking forward
thank you.
to reading the series. I'm glad you got a commitment for like the
Yes,
for 12 issues because I I'm as much as I enjoy the character, I like this iteration of it a lot
thank you.
because
Well,
it gives that dynamic of yeah, and back to what we were talking about in the beginning is that yeah, there's a lot of Batman elements to it, but there are a lot of Superman elements to it as well.
yeah,
And even beyond the powers is that he has like this he has a purpose that I
yeah,
think that can really be explored, and I really want to see that.
yes. I think
And I still love the mystery of the character himself.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think you're dead on with all of this. I mean, I think for me, the thing I like most about Space Ghost is like he strikes me as a little bit of a complicated, complex character in that, um, he fights pirates and space pirates, and there is, I think, a degree of vengeance that kind of goes into that. Like,
Mhm.
he's clearly working through some stuff, but he's
Right,
also sort of been in this arrested development emotionally, since his planet was attacked. But also there's like this inherent nobility to his core
right,
that when the chips are down and Jan and Jace have nowhere else to turn, and Space Ghost has literally known these kids for 5 minutes, and in one of them already shot him with like a stun blaster,
right.
he still says like, I'm here.
Yeah,
uh, and I think that's like kind of like the fateful moment that changes his life. um, and so yeah, I having Jan and Jace as like our point of view characters, the same way that like Kitty Pryde was the point of view character when she debuted in X-Men. Um, that's the reason why I had Brack and Sisto as our first villains, is that I wanted, if this was going to be a story about two twins, I thought, oh, the fact that Space Ghost has a pair of villains that are siblings,
right.
that feels like the perfect kind of opening act
Yeah.
for this. That we can also kind of show Jan doing her thing and Jace doing his thing,
Mhm.
splitting them up. Um, but yeah, I think the great thing about this series is that I've already got a long runway.
Yeah.
The fact that I pitched it as 12 issues in an annual, but we're doing this primarily as done in one stories.
Yeah.
And that way we're going to really maximize that runway, that you're not just feeling like, oh, hey, he's got like 2 or 3 arcs in him. This is with the exception, I think we're doing two-parters and maybe doing like a 3-parter for like our big finale. That means that we've got like, I guess the math is what, like 9 or 10 villains.
Mhm.
Like we're gonna rack up these adventures with Space Ghost and Jan and Jace, both to kind of play up the sense of time that has elapsed from
Right.
issue one until we wrap up the run, and to kind of deepen that relationship. But also, it's a kind of a way to trick readers a little bit,
Yeah.
in that there are a lot of readers who, we've talked about, they don't know who Space Ghost is. They know nothing other than maybe I recognize that design from Cartoon Network.
Right.
Uh, But by able to racking up each of these adventures and having so many like finished adventures, you get to feel like you know these characters better.
Yeah.
And that's a really, it's kind of a way to make every issue kind of swing with the maximum heft, but also to kind of give us back the power of the cliffhanger.
Right.
I learned this writing a two-parter for Fantastic Four is that like, the words to be continued, if you use them sparingly, suddenly you're like, oh, those people are in it. It's like it's a clean structure to have issue one being here's the setup, everything's horrible, like our heroes are in a trap. How do they get out? And then part two is here's how they get out.
Right.
And so we're having a lot of fun with this, and we're kind of using the villains as sort of our landmarks. And so you're going to see brand new takes on all the classic Space Ghost villains, Zorak, Brak, Metalis, the Widow, Creature King, Moltar, as well as a few deeper cuts you might not expect.
Right.
Because that's the cool thing about this character and his world is that um, Alex Toth has a million amazing villains, to the point where like I was like, here's some main villains, here's some like cameo appearances because I feel like we got to fit him in somewhere, and then there's a few like real deep cuts that like nobody's gonna be mad if they don't show up except for me.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh man, like if we extend our run, I'm throwing in the Eclipse Woman, I'm throwing in the Antimatter Man. I love those villains. I know they don't get a lot of love, but I love them.
Right.
And so, yeah, it really is. It's like, and it lets us play with a variety of different tones and
Right.
genres and influences. So that way I don't get like restless. I'm just like, oh, I want to write a heist issue. Great, it's done. I want like kind of a horror tinged issue. Great, here's what I'm going to do. I want a superhero blockbuster beat 'em up. Great. And I get to kind of slot in each of these villains in the ways that I think like kind of speak to their core concepts. And so, yeah, it's a series that really lets me check all of my boxes. And those are kind of my favorite books. The ones that if I wrote nothing else after this book, I would be able to show this one
Right.
and say I got to do it all. And that's how I feel about Space Ghost.
Gotcha. So, and to pivot from a series that started to one that you're wrapping up,
Yeah.
The Devil That Wears My Face, like kind of how did that concept come about? Because
Yeah.
as I was reading it, I was like, okay, this is like, I'm the the only horror movie that's ever scared me in my life was The Exorcist. Like I love horror
Yeah.
movies. I watch them.
Sorry about that.
No, no, no. But I'm saying like but in a good way. Like The Exorcist was like that first horror movie was just like, oh, like, well, I don't think this could happen, but it could happen.
Yeah.
So how did that concept come? Because it's really interesting in how it subverts a lot of things in that genre. So
Yeah.
where was your head at when you were thinking about The Devil That Wears My Face?
So every time that I work on a book, I tend to try to check off some stuff in my personal bucket list.
Mm,
Like my very first book, I was like, okay, I want to do a car chase, and I want to do like a little science fiction, like interlude, and it'd be cool to throw in some dinosaurs, like,
right.
and so I did that for Spencer and Locke. And the thing I have realized is every time I do a new book, I check off a couple things on the bucket list, and then I add on a bunch of other stuff to the bucket list that I'm like, oh, that'd be, I watch a TV show or I read a book or I read somebody else's comic, and I'm like, that was cool. I want to do something like that.
Mhm.
And so I'd had a couple things on my bucket list. I'd wanted to do a horror book. I'd never done a horror book before. I'd done like a couple of horror shorts, but nothing, in various anthologies, but nothing like full length. And in particular, I really wanted to do a body swap story. Face Off is one of my favorite movies. I love that movie so much. I was like just the perfect age when I first saw it. But it's one of those things like I know that like John Travolta and Nicolas Cage are like trying to overact each other, but
Yeah.
I love watching John Travolta acting like Nicolas Cage. And I was like, that's genuinely effective acting. And so I was like, I wanted to do I wanted to do these sorts of things.
Right.
And as I was talking, Mad Cave approached me. It was shortly before we announced Savage Avengers, but they had been huge supporters of my work dating back to Spencer and Locke.
Right.
And they came up to me at New York Comic Con that year and said, "Hey, listen, we're looking to ramp up our creator efforts, and we've got people like Cullen Bunn and Steve Orlando joining up." And those are creators I really respect. And they're like,
Yeah.
would you have the availability and interest to do something. And so as we were kind of batting ideas back and forth, we all really kind of glommed onto Devil really quick. Where I was like, oh, this supernatural body swap thing was really cool, that I was like, oh, like I can check off like a lot of these things that I wanted to do. So I did a lot of research on that. I read up on every single pope. Pope Clementi, who was the pope in our book, is a real pope who was blind and bedridden. When his tenure ended in 1740.
Right.
So yeah, it was just one of those. I mean, Mad Cave was so they were really open to me kind of like going a little crazy with this book. They gave me a real long runway. I was like, listen, I think with the twists and turns I want to throw in this, like I think 6 issues would be like the way to do it.
Yeah.
And they were really supportive of it. And there was a little, the development time took a while. Like I said, I was researching for a couple of months on this, reading about every pope. I was watching every exorcist thing I could possibly find. The original Exorcist. There was the Jeffrey Dean Morgan one, which was a Jewish possession movie,
Yeah.
which I think was called The Possession.
Mhm.
There's the Aaron Eckhart one. There's the autopsy, or the one of Emily Rose, The Haunting of Emily Rose. Everything I could watch. I watched The Young Pope, The New Pope. I watched Angels and Demons, and The Da Vinci Code. Like everything that I could to kind of learn about
Right. And that
and how
culture.
it worked.
Mhm.
So there was a lot, it's one of those things. My father-in-law loves demonic possession stuff. And so I really wanted to impress him by writing this book. And so the thing is that the real secret ingredient to that book is Alex Cormack. I've been a huge fan of Alex's for years.
Yeah.
It was a book called Sync through Comics Tribe that they often Kickstarter. That was my introduction to Alex's work. And I was just like, this guy's work is horrific, like in the best possible way, like really like scary stuff. And so Alex has worked with a buddy of mine, Rich Duick. And so I'm buddies with Rich. And so Rich introduced us at, I think it was like San Diego Comic-Con maybe.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Alex, not only is he like freakishly talented, he comes from an animation background. So he's all about the acting. He's very fast. He's very collaborative, but he's really nice. Like he doesn't need to be
Mhm.
nice. He's very talented. He could be a real jerk, but instead, he's like one of the most gracious collaborators I've ever worked with. And so the enthusiasm that he brought to the series, like that was like we waited, I think we waited 6 months for his schedule to open up,
Mhm.
because he's in demand, rightly so. But I was of the opinion, and Mad Cave was also of the opinion, that like, no, we got it, like Alex is the guy. Like we will wait for him for his schedule to open up.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate to get to work on that book, because by the time that we started kind of kicking in with the production of it all, Mike Martz and Christina Harrington joined Mad Cave, and I had worked with them on Scouts Honor, and like I said, I've known Mike since I was in college. So it was really nice to kind of get that band back together. Uh, I'm really proud of how that book came together. I think it's some of my best creator-owned work. There's a twist in issue 6 that is really kind of near and dear to me, and
Mhm.
for anyone who kind of knows a little bit about me, like it's some of the things I share on Twitter, it would explain why I would be writing this book. Yeah, I can't wait for people to read it and for people to kind of see like what we've been building to. I've been leaving breadcrumbs in
Mhm.
some of the earlier issues, and no one's caught them yet. But I think when you see it and you reread the book, you're going to be like, oh, there are little details that Pepose threw in here that like make a lot more sense now.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, Face Off meets The Exorcist, man. Like it just it's a concept that I was kind of surprised that nobody had done yet. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with how that book turned out.
Well, I'm definitely enjoying it. And
Thank you.
what is there anything that and I've asked this of other writers,
Sure.
and some answer, some don't. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Oh,
But
please.
is there like a character that you haven't written, that that you would like to like, and it could
Yes.
be from like
Oh my
any.
goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Tons. Doctor Strange,
Oh,
Shazam. I have a War Machine idea that's been burning a hole in my pocket for like a year and a half. Um, there's some deeper cuts too. Etrigan the Demon. Etrigan was actually the very first. When I was an intern, I had come up with like a very like it wasn't very good, but I came up with like a pitch for
mhm.
Etrigan. Doctor Fate. Uh, um, let's see, Firestorm. Love Firestorm. God, I'm a mark for him. For me, the thing that I really love, and maybe this is why I'm kind of a bad answer for this, is
Mhm.
that I love ensemble books. I love writing team books. Savage Avengers, I would have written that for 100 issues if the market could sustain it. Like I
Yeah.
love writing characters that get to bounce off of each other, and I think that's why I like Space Ghost so much, is that it's secretly an ensemble book.
Right.
And so for me, it's always about teams. I would love to write an X-Men team. I would love to write. I've gotten to write, Savage Avengers, and I got to write Avengers Unlimited. I got to write two arcs of that. One of with the Guardians, and I was like, this. I was living my best life working on those. Suicide Squad. God, what I wouldn't do to write the Suicide Squad. Or writing an offshoot Avengers team, or writing the Champions. Oh my goodness, what I would do to write the Champions. So that's like really where like my heart lies, is team
Right.
books.
Steamboat.
And I know that a lot of publishers, I think, are leaning, they're trying to, sort of shore up their individual
Yeah.
characters, and I totally understand why. But yeah, man, give me a team book any day of the week. I will have a lot of fun with it. And you can see it creep up in my work, where the vast majority of my books, they really are, it's me kind of sneakily turning them into ensemble books.
Hmm.
Just because, yeah, that's the fun of writing for me, is
Yeah.
that you take these characters, you try to define their personalities as strongly as possible, and then you throw them against each other.
Right.
And you watch them kind of like, they bicker and they argue and they make fun of each other and they fall in love and they hurt each other, and then they kind of help each other back up. And that's way more fun than just being like, and here's the main character, and then we might check in on a side character this week. I like throwing them all in the thick of it together, and seeing which one of them comes out on top.
Well, that's awesome. Um, if you want anyone to follow you online,
Yeah,
where would they be able to find you?
sure. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Pepos D, or David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pep news, or visit my website, which is currently under construction, at davidpepose.com.
All right. David Pepos, thank you so much again.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm absolutely looking forward to the rest of the Space Ghost run. And if you had any other projects that you want to talk about that you have coming up, outside, because I know you're wrapping up The Devil That Wears My Face and
Yeah.
just starting Space Ghost, are there any other projects that you have coming out that you want to talk about?
Yes, we're going to be bringing the OZ back to Kickstarter for our third and final Kickstarter. We're going to do that in a couple of months. Yeah, Ruben Rojas is almost done drawing the book, and I just have to do a quick lettering pass and record the Kickstarter video. But I wanted to make sure that Space Ghost kind of found its legs,
Cool.
rather than sort of have one book cannibalize the other, and that's why I pushed that third Kickstarter back. But that book has long been written, and the art is looking beautiful on it. So yeah, I can't wait for people to see kind of like our Mad Max take in the Wizard of Oz, and see how Dorothy and company make it out of the Scarecrow's clutches alive. So yeah, lots of fun coming on that one. And yeah, a few other things are in the works. I'm working on another big project right now. I've got a creator-owned thing that we're just about to sign the contract for, so we should hopefully be able to talk about that later this year, or maybe early next year.
Mhm.
Yeah, all the right irons are in the fire. Lots of fun stuff coming. But yes, Space Coast is my big swing for 2024. I'm throwing everything I got at it, and so far, if the response to issue one is any indication, I'm really excited for people to see where we're going to take this book.
That's awesome. And I would, when you do the Kickstarter, I'd love to talk to you again.
That'd be great. I will absolutely take you up on it.
All right, awesome. Well, David Pepos, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it, and I would love to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time.
All right, thank you. Once again, I want to thank David Pepose for being on the Fancast. Space Ghost is currently available from Dynamite Entertainment, and the epic finale of The Devil That Wears My Face is available from Mad Cave Studios. As always, you can find latest news and reviews on superpowerfancast.com. Please leave a comment, like, and share the video if you like it, and let me know what you like and what you don't. Until next time, this is Darren from Superpower Fancast, signing off.